All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. Casey, how's it going?
Things are good. Things are good. Yeah, interested to see if anyone's thinking of any strategies or anything top of mind going into the last couple weeks stretch here leading up to the big day.
I know it's crazy just how fast Q4 is playing out. Um, I feel like when I was a seller, it felt faster for some
Mhm.
reason, kind of being on the other side of it. Maybe
Right.
it feels a little slower, but it's just such a fun roller coaster. So if this is your first Q4 experience, please let us know in the comments. Because I want to hype you up. It's going to be such a wild ride. Like your first Q4, you cannot prepare for. Like you can
Yeah,
try, you can certainly try, and it's just you feel like you're holding on to a rocket ship, is what it feels like.
definitely.
Um, and this is something we've been talking about a lot in private groups. I do a lot of these like live calls, webinars, things like that. Um, and the thing I've been trying to get people to understand is basically the nuances of how to think about your strategy going into Q4, because a lot
Mhm.
of people have a lot of simplistic advice, and this is something that um, does work to give you a baseline for how to like begin to think about it. But your more experienced sellers understand the nuances and they think a little differently.
Mhm.
So the simplistic version is feed the beast as much as you can send and do it. Yes, that's not inaccurate information, but there is more to it. And so I've been kind of preaching this percentage of optimization of the opportunity concept. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is if you look at the opportunity of what you are capable of during Q4, that would, if you did everything, it'd be 100%. Hitting 100% is really difficult. And this is analogous to setting mins and maxes as a human. We either set them too high or too low. You can also do that with your inventory for Q4, right? You can send in too little or you can send in way too much. And there's kind of a sweet spot between these two. And a lot of sellers assume, well, if I sold out, I did good. Yeah, that's better than, having hundreds of thousands of dollars in inventory sitting in Q1 for sure. But my argument is that if you sell out of everything, that guarantees you did not get close to 100% of the opportunity,
Right.
right? And this is a hard thing to measure. And this is something you hone every year, every Q4 you go through. You start to kind of understand how your business works, what levers to pull to get higher, get closer to that 100%. And I think a lot of, especially newer sellers, are tend to be a little bit more hesitant. Like they want to ship in a bunch of things, but they want to avoid pitfalls, which I get that. But they end up only capturing 40 to 60% of the opportunity, is my guess. So the sweet spot, if you can't get it perfect, because you can't, I mean, that's just, of course, impossible. I think the sweet spot that people should be targeting is to have a little bit of inventory left over going into Q1. That lets you know you didn't sell anything out too soon, too fast. And this was my issue doing wholesale, right? I was not repricing and I had a toy, so it was moving like crazy. Knew I was going to run out in like 3 days, which is nuts. Um, Called my supplier direct with a brand, and they don't have anything available. Like they're like our warehouses are empty. Like we have to go to manufacturing now. So we will hit you back up in February of next year. So I sold everything, profitable certainly, but what I could have done is I could have been using repricing to reprice up using something like Maven to be able to slow down my velocity and capture more profitability on the inventory that I did have. Because I could have sold it instead of sell out thousands of units in 3 days. I could have sold it out in 2 weeks and probably gotten anywhere from 20 to 40% more profit margin with hardly any work, which is just dumbfounding to me. And so when you think about things like repricing, Q4 is where it starts to matter quite a bit, not just because you want to be fast and react, but what happens when the demand massively increases and sellers are starting to sell out and they're not repricing, and you become in the buy box and you're getting all those sales, but you could raise it 10, 15, $20 higher and still be getting tons of sales, and you don't. So on the surface it looks like, oh, I'm crushing it, look at all these sales coming through. Yes, but you're missing out potentially on the upside there. And so part of maximizing the opportunity of Q4 is not just selling everything, it's also selling at a good rate, at a good price, because you're not going to be able to replenish. That's the crazy part, right? So whenever you're talking about inventory, you got to ask yourself, what is the cost of replacement? This is a big thing when people get into like buying and selling luxury timepieces and exotic and luxury cars. It is, what is the cost to replace that thing is how you basically dictate the value on something that is scarce in getting again, right? So if I know that I can replenish my inventory tomorrow with a phone call or an email or a text, the cost of replacement is nothing. So yeah, let's keep it moving, right? As you get into Q4, that completely flips. The whole environment changes. Now you can't replace. So selling too fast without being able to replenish is the opportunity cost. And so you need to start to think about, well, I need to make sure my prices are positioned correctly so that I'm not giving that opportunity up. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to like put into words the frameworks in my brain. But this is how larger sellers think. Yeah. And I think newer sellers get stuck in these pithy feed the beast and blah, blah, blah. And again, great foundation to start to kind of build your model off of. But as you grow and scale, you have to get into the nuances of these things.
Yeah, and I agree. It's almost impossible to know what that perfect balance is, right? The way I always try to approach this, and I took this methodology when I worked on the Shopify side of things, is you're going to see that massive spike in demand and sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. But I myself, I do a little bit of shopping then, but I still do Christmas shopping first few weeks in December leading up. And if you don't have enough stock in place, you could obviously sell out too quickly, which is great. You recoup your revenue, or you recoup your initial investment with some profit. That's always good to see. But having a little bit more balance where maybe you are one of the only sellers the last 2 weeks before Christmas because everyone else is sold out on that listing, that's a great time to not necessarily jack up those prices, but have a more favorable price in terms of your initial investment, and stretching out that inventory, making sure it lasts that duration of time is really important, because one sale on Black Friday, or one item on Black Friday, could sell for $5 or $6 more on December 15th, 10 days before Christmas, when, all the dads or whoever is doing that last minute shopping online, trying to make sure that they have everything under the tree in time. So it is always interesting to kind of look at it. And I always try to encourage folks, whether you're in the Shopify space, in the Amazon space, whatever it may be, to kind of put your mind or put yourself in the shoes of what your customers may be going through. Obviously, those people who are going to be well prepared with their shopping lists in advance are going to want to buy then. But as time goes on, that demand will slow down a little bit, but it's still going to be much higher than it would be in July. It is a balance, and it's tough to kind of figure out where that is, but not being able to replenish. We really want to make sure that you do have an ideal price point that's going to make your inventory last throughout the remainder of the quarter.
Yeah. And here's a good way to think about this, right? Because we're basically talking economics here. I talk about supply and demand economics quite a lot. I think it's a good model for how to think through your Amazon business, because that's basically what you're doing. And so if we have supply and we have demand, we basically have this optimal price, right? So you have to think about, how is this shifting? And so what's interesting is we know that the demand is going to go up. So this line right here will increase, which means the price should be able to increase, assuming the supply doesn't change. Now the supply will change. So both these will shift up, right? Supply will increase, demand will increase, but I don't have hard data on this, but my thought, having experienced this and been in this industry for a little over a decade, is that the demand far outpaces the increase of the supply, which means your price should still be able to go up, right? If these went up equally, it would basically be the same price. Right. That's not necessarily true. The demand is far outpacing the supply increase. And again, you have to think about this on a timeline too, right? This is not a fixed thing. This is a real-time kind of graph. And so what's going to happen is some sellers are only going to send in 20 units because that's all they have available to them, right? There's a scarcity of supply on the purchase side, let's say you're doing RA as an example, OA also is included in this, where you can only purchase what you have available. And that could be 50 units. Okay, great. The supply technically went up, but as the demand is burning through that supply, it's not replenishing. So what can happen is this demand line shifts up, holds, while the supply side short term pops up and then begins to lower over time. And so that's the opportunity you want to be thinking about. You don't just want the short term increase in demand and then the supply and then burn out. You actually want to be able to hold as the supply side's coming down and you're holding that supply side. You basically want to think of this as, I want basically the first like 20% of the inventory to sell out as fast as possible so that the market is now adjusting to my price. That's one way you could theoretically look at this. It's like, okay, well, I know I'm going to have some sellers that are just trying to move super fast. Could be newbies, whatever. Let them do that. Again, we're not trying to get quick sales. We're trying to find that optimal price, which is what Maven's designed to do. And that could be going up. So again, start to think about this through this lens. I'm a big fan, by the way, of taking basically understanding what it is you're truly doing, labeling it correctly. I'll give you an example of this so that I can make it more practical, and then using the best practices of understanding that. So the example I always go to is wholesale. You don't learn wholesale. There is no course that teaches you, here's how to do wholesale. No. The only difference between RA, OA, and wholesale is the relationship. How you're purchasing and analyzing inventory is the exact same for the most part. So what is the select skill of wholesale? It's not technical. It's sales. And when you understand that, when you understand, okay, what are the steps to acquire inventory? Okay, well, RA, OA, a little bit more analytical, certainly. Okay, so if you're doing OA, you need to be pretty good at using computers because that's what you're doing, right? You're moving information around and doing analysis. Wholesale is completely different. What you're doing to acquire inventory is you are contacting suppliers, distributors, brands, opening accounts, and then placing the purchase orders. The hard part of placing the purchase orders and analyzing the inventory, that's the easy part. You could do that off the cuff. The hard part is the contacting, dealing with objections. Okay, now that I'm saying these words, it's like, oh, wait, that's just sales. So let me go and learn sales. So you can do that kind of same thing going into Q4 and be like, well, how do I need to view this? And what's a mental model I can use to better understand what is occurring and then use that information to make better decisions? Because unfortunately, this is not done a lot in our space. It's very much just tactic. And there's nothing wrong with those, but those should be cherries on top of the foundation of your knowledge and understanding. And if you think about any economics example, it's always widgets, right? That's what I loved being a finance major. Every example was, we're buying and selling blah, blah, blah widgets. Like I hated it because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. But this is so applicable to what we do. It's like you're literally widgets, right? Units in, units out. So you can take that foundational understanding that's been proven, that's been understood for countless decades, and use that as your base level of knowledge. I know I'm getting slightly academic here, but I'm telling you, the thing that fundamentally changed wholesale for me first was understanding it was sales. That was the first thing. If we get past that, the next thing was taking managerial accounting. It was the most boring class ever. But then at one point we're doing analysis, option A, option B. And it was a nice example because I'm not naturally analytical. That's just not how I am. But we said, okay, we have two choices here. Run the math. And so you'd run the math and be like, oh, okay, well, option A gives me this ROI or this profit amount. Option B gives me this. So instead of relying on intuition and being like, well, here's what I think makes sense, it's like, no, look at the math on it. So I started to do that with the wholesale business. Literally, I took that class. I did that example in the coursework. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is literally what I've not been doing with my Amazon business. And what's funny is in Excel, there's a, it's an optimization algorithm is what it is. And so it's been a hot minute, but basically I could put in everything that I wanted to purchase wholesale and a limitation. So I would say I've got, 10 grand to spend. Here's everything I can purchase. Here's how much I think I can move. Here's the potential profitability. Basically help me maximize my spend with those core limitations. And it would spit it out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this basically just told me, not 100%, but pretty well how to optimize my spend. Because as a seller, you're in one of two camps. And this is very sequential. You're either in the first camp, which is you have some, if not a lot of capital and not a lot of inventory, meaning you have a sourcing problem. But once you solve the sourcing problem, you've solved it. And so now you have a capital problem. And so if you have a ton of money, you're very liquid, you don't really have to worry about optimization as much. But the moment you have more potential inventory than you can purchase with your capital, you now have to make trade-off decisions. And so initially the most boring class in the world, I was like, wait, this is the most practical, impactful thing I could do because I now have this framework for how to think about it. And so now I can sit down and be like, okay, well, I have to make trade-offs. So I shifted my perspective on my inventory where I started to look at what's my average ROI. I wanted basically my money to become more efficient, right? When you're talking about investing, you want efficient money, meaning the average ROI is high. So what I would do is I would actually, James jumping in here, just waving hi. Welcome. James will enjoy this conversation. He geeks out like I do. So what I would do is I would go into Inventory Lab and sort my SKUs based on ROI. And so again, if I can replenish everything with the amount of capital I have, I would just do that. But what I started to do is I would keep opening accounts, whether I had the capital or not. And what I would do is, let's say I had my lowest thing was 9% ROI. A lot of people would scoff at that, but I would rather get a 9% ROI in 2 weeks than 0% and my cash just sit there, right? We got inflation, all these other things. But I would get a new account and get, let's say, something at 12% ROI. Okay, well, now I have to decide, do I want 9% or 12%? Well, obviously I want 12%. So I would intentionally not buy the 9%, buy the 12%, get my profit back out. Now I have more dollars to spend. And then I would basically be maximizing that 12% and rebuy the 9%. And you can snowball this. And so once I started to do that, I started to basically trade ROI. And so my biggest KPI towards the end was what's my average ROI? And I wanted to keep raising that over time, and I tracked it over time. That let me know that, okay, I have a limited capacity in capital, but I can intentionally focus on making that spin as efficient as possible. 9% is better than 0%, but 12 is better than 9. And you can just keep trading and trading. And listen, if I had something that came in at 20%, yeah, the 12 and the 9 gone until, again, I have cash sitting there. And so you want to have enough, in the VC venture capital world, they call it powder, right? You want to have enough powder, meaning you got enough cash. You also want to make sure that you have enough opportunities to deploy that cash, right? So it's these little subtle things that you start to pick up as you start to attempt to scale the business that forces you to think differently. And this is why I've said for the past decade, you cannot treat this as a side hustle. If you want to scale it, if you're like, I just want to make 10 grand a month, sales, and like, I'm good, this is just fun for me, negate everything I'm saying. But if you're actually trying to turn this into something that is sustainable and growing, this is kind of the mindset that you need to have. And data matters, right? I mean, we measure pretty much as much as we can here at Aura, because it lets us know how are things going, and can we predict if things are going to go good or bad in the next month? What do we need to focus on? What are the bottlenecks? What are the growth levers? Like, the business, essentially the data of the business will tell you what to focus on, which is like crazy, right? We kind of just naturally think, well, I'm the business owner, I'm the founder, I have to know everything. It's like, actually, at a certain level, the business kind of takes on its own identity and will kind of tell you what's up. But you have to be willing to track those things and understand what KPIs are worth tracking and which ones are not. Like, I never tracked the average sell price, I didn't really care. Now, the thing I did care about was the average sale price from a different perspective, because I realized as you go up in price point, the competition dramatically lowers. So how much competition for a $20 item? A ton. Why? Because it's cheap to purchase. But I started to only source things that I could sell over $100 because the competition just wasn't there, especially in wholesale. Now, has that changed? Yeah, a little bit. But nobody was willing to spend $116 per unit wholesale. I was, because I was going to sell it for $365. I was going to make $55, and then I could run PPC ads for an extra $5. So I'm now trading an additional 5 for 50, right? Like, and it's crazy. But I hope more sellers start to shift their perspective into this world, because I'm telling you, man, like it will fundamentally change how you view everything. I've been a big fan of Fardham Street. I think it's fs.blog now. Basically, he's an ex 3-letter agency guy. He was an analyst, if I'm not mistaken. Got real big on Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger's a big mental models, lattice of knowledge kind of guy. He became obsessed with mental models. He's got like, I don't know, 4 or 5 books, but everything's available for free online. All these different mental models. So like Occam's razor, the simplest, the simplest explanation is probably the right one, kind of a thing. There's Hanlon's razor, which is like never attribute to malice, that which can be attributed to ignorance. Like there's all kinds of things, you know, invert things. Like I think it's Warren who says like invert. Basically take a problem, invert it, and then try to solve it, because that immediately shifts your perspective to the 180. You could do these kind of things. And what's so cool is that it feels like it's relegated for Fortune 500 companies, and it's just not. It's available and highly applicable and practical.
Yeah, it's really, and I think we talk about it a lot on here, you know, looking at your data and being able to slice and dice it in ways that provides you with information that allows you to make informed decisions. And it's just about having that knowledge of how to slice and dice it, or being able to access that data. Obviously, there's so much data that's available now, and whether you find a tool, whether like yourself, you take an accounting class, or you educate yourself kind of like self-starter via YouTube and things like that. I'm sure there's all sorts of courses that can at least get you started in that direction. But just being able to make those intelligent decisions and look at your business from what would probably be the most advantageous perspective based on that data is going to just improve your performance and the ability to continue to grow and make those more intelligent decisions as time goes on. So yeah, your trading ROI theory, there is a couple social media pages that I followed where a guy would go to like a baseball cards conference and would start with like a $5 card and would try to trade up all the way to whatever he could end by the end of the day. And there would be times when he'd get up to a couple $1,000s worth of stuff just by negotiating, knowing values of things where other people may be undervaluing them. And it's all just being able to intelligently dissect whatever information you're provided in data and make decisions based on that. So sometimes easier said than done, sometimes easier.
Always easier said than done.
Easier said than done, to whether it's know what to do or be able to look at that data correctly or find that data. But definitely a good place to start if you're looking to, like you said, Dylan, make this more of a full-time growth type of business, as opposed to, hey, I'm just paying for my vacations with it.
Yeah. And I think, again, the thing that has bothered me about our space, and something I've been trying to work on helping change, is like, we talk a lot about the tactics, but we rarely talk about the fundamentals of what we're really doing here. And I think that's why a lot of Amazon businesses feel very fragile, is because they don't have the foundations. That's why one little thing, you shut down business. It's like, no, like you miss these minor few things that would have helped you avoid that entirely. I do want to share this because I think it's worth the read if nobody knows about it. This is Fardham Street that I was talking about. It's fs.blog. There's newsletter, all kinds of cool stuff. But if we scroll down here, there's a mental models section. And it basically breaks out different well-known mental models from different subjects, right? So general thinking, physics, chemistry, biology, systems, numeracy. I wanted to say numerology, microeconomics, military and war, human nature and judgment. Like, I've got this first book. I haven't read these other ones, but basically everything's here for free. And so like one of the ones I was just talking about is down here. So inversion, Occam's razor, basically keep it simple. Hanlon's razor, mental safeguard against the temptation to label behavior as malicious when incompetence is the most common sense. I literally use this with all the Section 3 stuff with a blog post. It was just like, hey, maybe here's a different way to think about it. Like, let's not just assume Amazon hates us. Like, let's assume there's probably something forcing them to act this way. But there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think one that a lot of sellers don't think about is second order thinking. So you always have like cause and effect. We know this, right? If I do X, Y is probably going to happen. But if I do X and Y happens, what is Z? That gets interesting. And so now when you start to make decisions, you're making more sustainable decisions because you're actually thinking about that second effect, not just the first order. That's a great one. And what's nice is like he summarizes these incredibly well, but I mean, there are whole blog posts going deep into these things to really understand, okay, what is this? Like, how do I apply it? The books are good. I think you can get by just reading the free stuff. There's a few others I think that are really good. Yeah, so we like to talk about leverage, right? We like to talk about outsourcing. We don't really use the word leverage as much in our space from what I've seen. It's really just outsource, get VAs. But really what we're doing here is applying a form of leverage. Well, actually, as we find out, there's different forms of leverage. And again, if you can label something, you can now look into it. I believe that language dictates reality. So if you don't have the language for something, you don't have it in reality. You can't even search for it, right? If I jump into a new industry and I don't know the terminology, I can't even go learn it. I don't know it exists, right? There's what I know, what I know, I don't know, and then what I don't know, I don't know. Like, and that's the biggest sphere, and we're trying to, compress that. But this is fantastic. It gives you a really good idea for what leverage is as a foundational thing, and then how to apply this, in negotiations, in business, and then there's similar models. Actually, Power Law is actually pretty amazing. We say 80-20 all the time. That's called the Pareto principle. There's tons of books on it, and it's actually incredible. I actually read the first book on this, and it really changed a lot for me. See, outsourcing is in here. But you'll notice it's a subset of leverage. So you might only be looking and applying a subset of an entire field of something that could fundamentally change things. That's crazy to me. So yeah, it's great. I wanted to bring this up just because I kind of off the cuff mentioned this as a resource, but I wanted to show it off a little bit because I think it's absolutely fantastic. When you think about being a founder or a business owner, you're the least educated, knowledgeable person working on this problem. You have no idea what you're doing every single day. I've been doing this for a decade, and that's still true. So the core things I have to get good at is learning really fast and understanding how to think correctly, which I don't always do. Accelerated learning. How do I do that relatively fast? I mentioned things like Perplexity for being able to ask questions and move fast. I literally just did that showing the supply and demand curve. But what's the broader picture of that is like, well, how do you go about learning things relatively fast? Because your speed of growth, in my mind, comes down to how fast you can accumulate knowledge and apply it. You've never interviewed somebody to hire them. Great. You don't know what the heck you're doing. Great. How do we learn how to do that really fast? I mean, listen, I'm non-technical, meaning I'm not a software engineer. I'm nerdy, so I'm technically savvy, but I'm not technical. But in having to interview software engineers, especially the first time, the most uncomfortable thing. I don't know what to ask. I don't know how to know if they're lying to me. So I had to quickly learn enough about tech at that level to be able to call BS if somebody tried to give me a BS answer, right? They know I'm non-technical and I'm going to do a one-on-one. So there's nobody there to check them and they think I can't. I ask a question, they give me an answer, some technobabble. I have to be able to say that's correct or that makes sense, or be able to ask secondary questions to dig deeper. So at this point, I feel like I need to do a whole course for, you know what I mean? This is the stuff that gets me excited. I'll give you the reason why. In third grade, I was labeled learning disabled. So ADD, dyslexia, and short-term memory deficit. Well, nobody taught me how to learn. It kind of sounds weird. Went to school, nobody taught me how to learn. It was just expected you just do these things. So eventually I got fed up enough because the teacher told me I was never going to be able to go to college. I was so annoyed and aggravated. I said, well, all right, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I went and read all these books on how to learn and all these different things. It's like, wait, nobody told me these things. These make complete sense. You know, there's things like it's in Moonwalking with Einstein. Great book, by the way. Journalist goes into the world of memory championships. Weird subset, right? This is like the Rubik's Cube kind of guys, right? And the whole thing is like, can you memorize like pi to like nth degree, or how many decks of cards in sequence can you memorize? He gets into it to write a story. Turns out there's a book idea there. He learns and becomes a memory champion. So I'm reading the book, and it goes in depth into a few of the different ideas. And one of the concepts is called a memory palace. So if you take your home and you create a linear path, you walk the same path every single time, right? So you got it in your mind, and you set these locations. These locations are called loci. Just call them locations. And in those locations, what you want to do is you want to take the information you want to remember and you convert it to a very appealing visual thing. So I did this with a equation in one of my business calc classes. I had sigma at the top. So I turned that into like a weird alien guy that looked like the thing sigma. Great, right? Like I'm just trying to make that as sticky as possible. And I remember I did this for my business law class. It's like one of the hardest classes. Weeded out a lot of people. Everybody before the exam is like, you know, quick study. And I'm just sitting there just kind of meditating, walking my path. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine. Everybody's freaking out. I sit down, and I remember first question, I started to walk through my memory palace. Is like, oh, yep, there's that answer. I'll be up there. And I laughed out loud halfway through the exam because like I feel like I'm cheating. And I'm not, but I feel like I am. And I bring that up to say, like, there are more, and I keep saying this, but like there are more foundational things that you can learn that are generally applicable to business. And it's these things that we just don't talk about. They're not sexy. I get it. You know, it's not like, hey, here's how to 2x your sourcing. But there are things that would 1,000% speed you up. And massively increase your growth rate, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of little things like that, just whether it's simple things like creating a more effective routine or being able to analyze. I know we talk about analyzing data, whether it's able to rewire how you approach solving problems. Those things are typically the hardest to learn. They're the most boring to learn, but they do typically have the biggest impact, especially on your day-to-day. If it comes to, like you said, being able to learn differently in a way that's more applicable to how you consume information, like that's just going to exponentially improve your ability overall, let alone in specific categories where learning in that specific way is maybe more directly correlated to whatever that information may be. So yeah, it would be interesting. And I'm sure if you're looking for blog post ideas, I'm sure people would love maybe just like, for lack of a better term, like a book club or resources where they can just kind of go and start to analyze how they're approaching problems, how other same or more successful people are approaching the same problems, and just trying to unlock, for lack of a better term, like more potential and raising your own performance ceiling in a way.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I might have to do like a blog post that covers what I think is the most applicable mental models for sellers. That might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I in college I went down this rabbit hole real deep. It's been a hot minute, but it does help. You know, there's a lot of things that just kind of stick with you. That it's funny when I get on these podcasts, people are like, oh, like one of the smartest guys I know. I'm like, no, like, no, but I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it, but no, I just learned these skills. And honestly, I think anybody can learn those skills. It's just knowing what those are. Oh yeah, Jackie, what's the name of the book again? It's called Moonwalking with Einstein. Great read. Honestly, just a super awesome read. It's not like a how-to, but it does go deep into like the foundations of memory techniques essentially. There's guys that go even deeper. There's a way to do this with numbers, because a lot of these guys are memorizing numbers, and there's a system for applying basically a certain image to each number and then combining those in a certain type of way. That system, I didn't need to learn it, and it takes a little bit of time to like memorize the system and then apply it. And I was like, I just need to ace this exam, so didn't go that deep. Yeah, and here's a link to that as well. So fs.blog for Farnam Street. Honestly, it's a great read. It will really get you thinking differently, and I think sellers need more tools for how to think on their own. I've seen this countless times where you follow somebody who's teaching you the business, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love it. But if you're relying on them for making decisions once you're up and running, all you're doing is building their business. And you might have unique perspectives that you just don't know because you haven't tried to unlock them yet that could help you stand out even further. And so what you really want to do is hone your process for making decisions. And a lot of what we do, Daniel Kahneman, behavioral economist guy, wrote a book on this called Thinking Fast and Slow. And so basically humans have system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is what we're used to, which is like fast. It's examples, it's allegories. It's just what feels right. It doesn't require a whole lot of energy or thinking. We just kind of go, boom, it's that. System 2 is very energy intensive. So it takes long periods of time, a lot of thinking, but you end up getting better results in doing that. And funny enough, they're applying this kind of system 1, system 2 to AI right now, which is kind of cool to see all these worlds collide. But don't read that book. It's incredibly stupidly dense. That's all you need to know about the book. But my point is like, okay, well, if those two things are true, how do I spend more time in system 2 thinking than in system 1 thinking? The easiest way to do that is to understand certain mental models and best practices. I mean, listen, this is what we do, right? We find best practices with people who have already honed them, and then we use that as the foundation. This is why we're so good at customer support. It's not because we're so special. And when I set it up initially, like I had all these brilliant ideas. That's not true. I went and found who's the lead person on this, who's known for doing this correctly, studying how they did it, and more importantly, understanding how they think about it. And then now that's our foundation as a team. And so that's how we started to stand out really well in support. I was just copying what they had already written and done and honed for me, which is interesting because if I was doing it myself, my sample size is so much smaller. But this is a company who does this and lives, eats, and breathes it. This company called Intercom, who we use. So their sample size is much larger. So they're going to be able to have more accurate and precise recommendations and advice based on what they've seen. This is why I keep telling people, don't rely solely on yourself for repricing. Use our team, because our sample size of seeing problems is much larger than yours ever could be as a single individual or even with a group of friends. So even from that perspective, this is why we're like, no, please reach out to the team, ask all the questions you have. Like if you're feeling like you're wanting to make a decision, but you don't have the confidence in it, ask for our advice on that decision, because we can give you that confidence. We can say, yeah, that's a great idea. Or, it's a mediocre idea, but let's give it a shot and see, right? Like we'll let you know those things. It's so important. And actually one of the mental models is called the circle of competence. It's basically like, what are you actually an expert in? And what do you know you don't know? Right. And so if you don't know those things, great, go find somebody who does. Like now customer success is in my circle of competence because I built that, but initially not even close. Like I don't know what I'm doing, but now that is right. And so that's another great mental model that Farnam Street covers. That is well worth reading, especially when you're talking about like building teams and stuff like that. It helps you kind of get an idea of like, okay, how do I map my circle of competence within my business? And then where am I lacking? And do I need to go acquire that knowledge, accelerated learning kind of a thing? Do I need to go hire somebody, outsource it, all those different things? Again, these mental models are really designed to kind of give you a focal point of how to think through things that are complicated in a really structured way.
Yeah. And I think one point that you made there that's really important in terms of just being able to maximize productivity, business outputs, whatever it is learning how experts in the space think about it. Because if you're looking to solve one specific problem and you see how they solved it, that's great. But when you have a different problem come up, you're not going to know how to solve that. And you have to go look for at the same expert for a different problem, look for a different expert who's maybe solved that problem directly. But if you teach yourself how to analyze these problems and go about problem solving the way the experts do, it's going to naturally make it more, or it's going to make it more natural for you to solve those specific problems as they come up where you may not have an example to point to. And as we know, like various SKUs and various listings fluctuate quickly and very significantly from one another. Excuse me, getting my words caught up there. But if you know how someone thinks, if you reach out to our team about how we kind of look at it from a 100-yard view as opposed to a 10-yard view, you're going to get a better sense as to things to look at or ways to go about improving performance, solving a specific problem, competing against a certain type of seller. And that's just going to kind of ramp up your ability to continue to improve your own performance, your business performance, specific listing performance, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. This is why I love the approach we take for onboarding sessions with users, because we do two important things. Before we dive into those two things, we're asking you questions to personalize it and understand your nuances. That matters tremendously for context. But the two things is, one, you're not going to leave with a bunch of notes that you now have to go remember and apply. We did it for you in real time. But the thing that goes really well with that is number two, which is we explained why certain things were being set the way they were to give you a foundational understanding of how things work. Because what I don't want to do is be like, cool, we just built these 3 strategies for you. You're off to the races. But the next time you need a 4th, you're like, I don't know what to do. No. I want to teach you to fish, not give you a fish, kind of a thing. Right. But I'm also kind of like giving you a fish while teaching you to fish. You know, but it is so important, because at the end of the day, like, we're as hands-on as you need us to be as a seller, but I don't want you to need us. Is that, if that makes sense? Like, we're always there. You know, it's kind of like a parent. Like, I'm always here if you need us, but my job is to teach you to not need us so you can operate on your own and be autonomous. And we do that in 20 something minutes. That's the thing that's crazy to me. Like, these really should feel like they should be an hour long, but they don't need to be. We've honed it so many times that in 20 minutes we can just boom, boom, boom. You go from feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing, maybe it's your first repricing software, to I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how it works. More importantly, we're good here. And I know where to go to get answers. It's funny. I was doing a live yesterday with a group. User's been with us for 3-ish days. And she's like, yeah, I've really been hesitant to reach out to support. I'm like, okay, well, why? And she's like, well, you know, my expectation my experience from all the other Amazon software companies that I've worked with has been horrible with support. So I just naturally assumed you would be the same. And I was like, no. Because always in these conversations, I'm like, listen, annoy our team. That's what they're here for. Like, ask questions. Like, you're not alone here. And like, I'm like, no, I want you to do it more, not less. And it's crazy that we have set this expectation in our Amazon software world that you're just going to get crappy support. That is dumbfounding to me. And I don't really think that we're doing anything necessarily crazy different. We're just doing it right. You know, there's a lot of things that we know we could be doing better on, that we're going back into the system. We just updated our onboarding system thanks to Casey's feedback and work there. And so, like, we're still not even perfect, but man, it's just crazy when somebody's like, oh, I can actually just reach out, ask a question, get a real answer, and know that the team actually is looking out for me. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I'm doing that right now. I'm like, great. Like, you know, it's just dumbfounding that expectation is almost just generally accepted at this point. And it shouldn't be. The standard for support should be incredibly high.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the way we approach it is a great blend of initial setup to get you started, but then ongoing support. I mean, like you said, one thing we really try to focus on, partially because we're a small team, but also because it makes you more effective is making you self-sufficient. So if we're not just solving problems, we're going, hey, this is what's going on here, this is what I recommend, and this is why I recommend it. So those 3 phases of kind of problem solving is also in part to help educate you folks on how to kind of face these as they come up. So you don't always have to reach out to us. But with that being said, we are always there. And then we do have, and we've been working on building out the support documentation that we provide. Dylan mentioned our core 3 strategies. Finn just released an article on that a few weeks ago that kind of breaks down, hey, these are the most popular strategies, why you should use them and when you should use them based on varying goals on certain listings, where they want to be more or less aggressive or whatever it may be. And trying to serve that up to you folks when it's timely. We have some activity-based emails that are going to go to you with certain help docs if you're looking for certain things. And if you ever are looking for advice, like I said, always reach out to me via chat and email at hello@goaura.com. Or if there's a specific article that you guys want, I can send that over. If there's maybe a gap in that support documentation that we don't currently provide, let us know. It's easy for us to kind of spin up an article and get something live for you folks to observe and kind of continue to dive deeper into, just to continue to make yourselves more self-sufficient moving forward.
Let's see, James here on the Q4 dashboard, is there an X overall, like the top sellers of Aura? So we don't have a leaderboard, if that's what you're alluding to. We like the idea. A lot of people are very secretive. So we kind of have to, there's a lot of things I wanted to show on this that, like top categories, top products, we're like, nobody's going to share it if that's the case. Okay. Know the little trophy on there. Let's see here on Q4 dashboard. Oh, yours says X overall. You should see a numerical value, unless I'm misreading. Sorry, James.
Yeah, I think he's referring to, it might say a number overall, which I do believe is within our own customer base, not overall Amazon sellers, but I could be wrong there.
Okay, yours does have a number. Yeah, just clarify for me what exactly you mean. Sorry, I'm slow today. I'm going to pull this up to show everyone too. So here's what that looks like. So we do have that, numerical value overall, and then, top whatever percentage based on revenue. We're doing both these off of revenue, by the way. And this is in aggregate throughout all of Q4. Oh yeah, dude, I read that completely wrong. Sorry, I just reread it and it clicked.
Yeah, where were your the top right section there?
So basically, if you're first overall, you are the highest revenue account inside of Aura. Yeah. So almost top of Aura. I dig it, dude. Heck yeah. Share your number in chat if you feel comfortable. Kind of work on boosting my numbers. See, this is what I wanted with this though, is like, I've been seeing a lot of this on Twitter where it's like, man, this is really cool. I got to work harder. I'm like, that's exactly what we wanted. It's like, it gives you an idea of like, where are you at and are you crushing it? Or like, should you really be like going harder? 27th. I dig it, dude. All right. Well, we got to get you in top 10. That's where I want you to be at, James. Top 10. That's awesome, man. Absolutely fantastic. And James, if you wouldn't mind, share that on social. There's a save image in the top right button. Click on that. We'll format it for you, and share that on socials and tag us. Love it. So we got about 10-ish minutes here. I know we've really been going off the deep end, geeking out. I figured today would be kind of light with viewers and traffic, just based on elections, all that good stuff. But looks like we got a decent amount of people here. But any questions you have for us related to anything, repricing, Amazon, Aura, selling in general, throw that in the chat. We're happy to dive deep into there. I've just kind of been riffing on some nerdy things for you guys.
It's always good stuff, though. Not just
that's
aimlessly riffing. Not just aimlessly.
That's good. Sometimes it feels that way. And I'm like, oh, I hope Casey's not dying on the inside right now.
There is jumping from topics. There is always a link from one topic to the other. So it's not sporadic or anything like that.
This is how my brain works with ADD. It's like literally this massive web of random things that somehow link. And I can prove they link, but it sometimes is a really thin link. Oh, I love it. See, I already broke your team last week. I love it. So the team was telling me about the bug you found, and Jacob was saying that he fixed it live, and he didn't think that you and Finn thought he was being serious, but he actually did fix it live. So that's fixed. Oh, that's funny. But I heard the onboarding session went really good, so that made me happy to hear from both parties, which is exciting. So glad to hear that went well. Yeah, Jacob's the new software engineer on the team. Actually, back there behind Casey, dude's just been that guy right there. Dude's just been crushing it. He's been fantastic so far. Lots of ideas for the future. Yeah, literally 2 hours after you signed up, you had a laundry list, and it was such good stuff. I'm like, let's go, dude. No, it's awesome, man. I appreciate it. It's always nice when somebody gets in, they enjoy it, but they're like, but I have so many ideas. I'm like, yes, dude, that's what we want right here. That gets us pumped, right? Because sometimes you jump into a tool and you're like, this is horrible. I have no ideas. Leave me alone, right? Just apathy. No, we kind of get the inverse where it's like, heck yeah, but I have this vision for all these things we could do. I'm like, yeah, man, that's exactly what we want. James, if you haven't gotten on the mental model train with Farnham Street, I think you should. I know we were geeking out with AI the other day, and I did speak to Will recently, by the way. Great guy. James has been introing me to other massive nerds. He's like, you guys would get along. He's like, I don't know why, but you should just talk.
Yeah, it's always good to have a community brain blast every now and then. Make sure that you're thinking about things the right way.
Exactly. James, I have not spoke with Luke yet. I'm trying to schedule a time with him right now. I got Howie on the case. I did, by the way, put together, it's on my personal blog. I'll share this because I get asked for it quite often, which is like, what are my favorite AI software tools? I try pretty much everything. Not everything is that great. So I basically created a blog post that I will be updating as things change, but these are things that I actively use and like. So everything here is pretty amazing. And then I'm starting to add different resources of like, not necessarily the mental models, but things that kind of helped me get to this point of like how to think about automation and all these different things. This blog post alone it's actually a series, but this first one really sets the stage. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, these are just tools that I actively use. Last two are mainly on the coding front, so not really applicable for everyone. But like I just mentioned Howie, that's this guy right here. Sparkle, actually funny name, but it actually automatically organizes my file system, which is pretty cool using AI. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and you guys hear me talk about Perplexity way too much, so that's obviously number one. But just wanted to share that. So it's just DylanCarter.com, and then it's there. I'm starting to write a little bit more on the personal side. I don't have a ton of time to do it, so when I do, I'm like trying to. I used to write a lot more, but I'm mainly writing for the Aura blog now, so gotta stay prioritized there. But yeah, I think I'm probably going to do this mental model blog post for next week for Tuesday. Obviously the team will be out as a heads up for Monday for Veterans Day. So we will be out of the office on Monday. Still, checking everything, making sure everything's running smoothly, but we'll be back in the office on Tuesday. So that blog post will go live on Tuesday, but I'll basically cherry pick the mental models that I think are the most applicable to sellers, and I'll write a blog post on those.
Nice. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for folks just to have a couple of different perspectives on how to approach specifically problem solving. I think, no matter what type of problem you're facing, if you have different ways to problem solve, I think that's always advantageous, and things that I've found to help me personally, both professionally and personally. I don't have any specific ones to tie to a specific model or anything. I just have my own theories and ways about going things, but I'm sure a little bit more of an official process that's backed by other people who have done it would definitely help some folks.
There are problems that everybody gets hit with, that there is like a single best solution. So I've had this idea for probably the last year. We just haven't had the time to act on it, but I want to create like a directory of how to do X, right? So like you got a section 3, here's literally the playbook to deal with it. Because what happens right now is you go on Twitter, you search for it, you ask questions. Some people give you good results, some people don't. So you can't really move fast on these things. But if there was like here's literally the playbook of how to like solve X, Y, or Z, to at least give you the foundation, and then like kind of tell you, all right, here's the details, here's the nuances you need to consider. I think that would be kind of cool, because our whole thing is like, how do we help you succeed? So that would be kind of a fun little side project.
Definitely.
See, how have you thought about an aggressiveness dial within Aura/Maven? Yeah, so this is a good one actually. I think about it in Maven quite a lot. I think talked about it this morning in stand up. I think about it based on life cycle, so span. So a lot of sellers are, when you look at why sellers change their strategies, yes, they're changing the aggressiveness, but the reason why they're becoming more aggressive is because time. So age of inventory, basically. And so the initial idea, and don't hold me to this, but this is just kind of a thought process, is like, it would be interesting to factor in average age of inventory into Maven, where you can say, hey, if age of inventory is greater than input field days, you could say 30, 45, 60, whatever made sense for you, because it is different seller to seller, become more aggressive. But the moment it's beneath that, then do your regular kind of thing. That's one aspect. Another aspect is adding it into workflows as a trigger. A little bit more complicated. It's a simpler solution for us to roll out, but there's more logic that the end user has to be able to apply that makes me hesitant to go that route, because I think it's easier for people to understand what they're attempting to do and us just solve the second problem of that. Because when you're talking about making a change and you wanted to go backwards, well, with workflows, you would need 2 workflows. And just in seeing how sellers use the platform, I think a lot of people would set that first one, but not the reversion back second one. So I'm thinking through that lens as well, because I want it to be as easy to understand and implement as possible. But yeah, we are thinking about it from those 2 perspectives so far. There's a few other ideas kind of getting floated around, but I'd say those are the main 2.
Yeah, and in the meantime, James, I'm sure Finn covered this because this is kind of like his golden child that he's created recently, but I am posting our help article on our core 3 strategies, and they do have varying levels of aggressiveness. If you had your onboarding call, Finn more than likely covered that, but wanted to just post that there as a resource to kind of synthesize being able to be more aggressive depending on specifically that inventory age, typically starting with Maven, then the buy box strategy, and ending with liquidation to kind of recoup your initial investment. But for anyone who's looking for an initial general playbook, I would say you can apply probably about at least 70% of your listings to that general logic. Obviously, the 15% on either end will kind of be individual cases where you may need to be a little bit more specific, but definitely a great place to start if you're looking for initial guidance on strategies, when to be aggressive, and how to set them up.
Yeah, nice. Put this up on a banner too for everybody to see. Nice. Cool. So I think that's going to be it for today. I appreciate everybody making the time to come hang out with us, ask some questions. Glad we got to dive into some more nerdy stuff that I've definitely enjoyed and wish more people would find. I know that a lot of this stuff is hard to discover. So I try to make that, as discoverable as possible on my end. So hopefully this provided a ton of value. We do this every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. EST. Just to dive in, there's no real format here. We just geek out, answer any questions you have, and just kind of have a great conversation and nerd out. But don't feel like you have to wait for next week to answer or to ask questions. Reach out to support, get an onboarding session scheduled if you have not already. Use our team. We are very different in how we approach support. So if you have bad expectations, go ahead and test us against those. I promise you won't be disappointed. expected. Do not let that hesitation keep you from answering your questions, growing, and doing better as a seller. With that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week.
Yep. Yeah. And just that quick reminder, we are out of the office Monday, so support will be back up in full on Tuesday there. We'll answer those questions that came in over the weekend as they came in. But yeah, have a good rest of the week. We're here to help, and we'll speak or see you all next Wednesday, same time, same place.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.